Hi. I want to talk about some problems I've had when trying to use my breath controller to produce quiet, expressive music. I'll demonstrate the problem using a couple of MIDI instruments. These are from a company called Audio Modeling. So let me give you the basics. Breath controller sends MIDI values ranging from 0 to 127, and these control the volume of the notes being played. The value of 0 means don't make any sound. So that leaves 127 levels to go from the quietest note to the loudest. You might think that having only 127 levels is one of the problems I'm going to talk about. It's not. 127 levels is enough to give 16 steps for every dynamic level from pianissimo to fortissimo. And if a piece of music only goes from piano to forte, you can have 32 steps per dynamic. The problems I've had come from how the MIDI levels are mapped. Now, we have two levels to think about. The dynamic range of the breath controllers range from 1 to 127. The dynamic range of the MIDI instrument is the volume difference from the quietest to the loudest note. And so when I talk about mapping, what I mean is how each MIDI value is associated with a particular sound level. If you're paying attention, you might have noticed that I did include the value 0 when I was talking about the MIDI dynamic range. 0 actually turns out to be the first problem. When a MIDI instrument goes from, say, 100 to 99, or from 2 to 1, it lowers the sound level by a small step. But when you get to 0, the sound stops. What you learn pretty quickly is that if you want to play a quiet note, particularly a long quiet note, you have to be very careful never to drop down to 0. What that means is that a value of 1 isn't particularly useful because it's hard to maintain a steady value of 1. And it's not just 1, it's any of the smaller values. It turns out that audio modeling instruments make the problem a bit worse. First, they don't produce any sound below a MIDI value of 2. I don't know why it's 2 instead of 1 like everybody else. Second, once you drop to 1 or 0, you need to reach a value of 4 on their wind instruments or 6 on their string instruments to get your sound back. So what happens is that if you try to play a very quiet note, the sound may stop abruptly. And then you try to restart the note, you have to blow a lot harder so that when the note sounds, it will be louder than what you wanted. You drop back down, and the note might get cut off again. It's very frustrating. The second problem is with the dynamic range. Let's say you try to fix the first problem by dropping the volume on your speakers so that the quiet note you want can be played with a MIDI value of 10 or more. Okay, you fix the first problem. You've got a quiet note, and you can sustain it without getting cut off. But your loud notes are also going to be quieter. So what you really want to do is extend the dynamic range. You want the low MIDI values to get quieter without affecting the higher MIDI values. To fix these problems, I've written two effects modules for Reaper, which is the digital audio workstation, or DAW, that I use. The first module averages low breath controller values to smooth out small variations. It can also give less weight to certain values, such as those below 2. So the time-weighted average of the MIDI values is much easier to control and to keep from dropping to 0 or even 1. The second module allows me to adjust the dynamic range of each MIDI value using a Bezier curve. Okay, let's move on to the interesting part, the demo. I'm going to play a short passage I recorded using the Audio Modeling clarinet. The clarinet settings were all at their default values. While playing, I was watching a display that gave me feedback on how hard I was blowing into the breath controller. I tried to keep the value just above the cutoff. When I heard the sound stop, I blew harder until I heard the note again. Remember, the sound cuts off at the value 1. It restarts at the value 4. Here's what it sounds like. It's rather choppy, isn't it? Now let's listen to the same MIDI data with my averaging module enabled. The bottom two sliders of the module show the breath controller's input value and then the average value that is sent to the clarinet. That sounds a lot better. There's a bit of unevenness due to the fact that I had to occasionally increase the value to 4, something I wouldn't have done if I'd had the module enabled while playing. Here's the same passage with the expanded dynamics module. The curve shows how much each MIDI value alters the dynamic. The lowest value has a minus 18 decibel drop. The upper values are left unaltered, and the green dot tracks the MIDI value. In the second passage, I'll play a few notes and I'll vary the dynamics from quiet to loud. Here's the standard clarinet, unaltered. Now I enable the averaging. Finally, I enable the dynamic range expansion. Okay, let's repeat all this with the violin. We're back to having me try to play a long, quiet note. You didn't hear much, did you? The violin required the value of 6 to start the sound, and the MIDI data was recorded with the clarinet, which only needs a 4. If I'd been listening to the violin when I recorded this, I would have blown harder, and you would have heard something. Let's turn on the averaging module. That was better. We actually got a quiet note. Now let's expand the dynamic range. Okay, let's move on to the second passage. Here's the violin by itself. And now with the averaging module. And with the dynamic expansion. Thanks for watching.